الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين وبعد. Ukraine was invaded by Russia, and the whole world, except for a few countries, came to the aid of Ukraine. A lot of billions of dollars. I can't tell, is it 30, 40, who knows? Tanks, airplanes, guns, intelligence, training, cash for civilians, helping the countries surrounding Ukraine to take care of the Ukrainians who took shelter in those countries from the devastation that Russia brings wherever they go. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught us in the Quran that He does not like mischief. And Russia did a lot of mischief for the past 2 centuries against Muslims. They invaded Muslim lands, and the killing, oppression, destruction they brought on those areas are unimaginable. In addition to, when the Soviet Union came, they forced them to abandon their religion, at least in public. And you know, the communists and what they did to Islam and Muslims and to other religions, it's unbelievable. Then the Soviet Union went, and Putin came, the butcher of Chechnya. It is reported that 1/5 of the Muslims of Chechnya were killed by the Russian armed forces. Putin is responsible for that. And the criminals who carried out his killing, destruction orders, the unbelievable destruction in Chechnya, using, all kinds of weapons that the Chechen Muslims did not have. Then came Libya, and the Russians were not invited to have any share in what happened to Gaddafi in Libya. And then we know the misery that happened since then. Then came Syria, and the Russians wanted to have a say in Syria. Obama and his Vice President Biden refused to help the Syrians defend themselves. They blocked other countries from sending weapons to Syria. And Obama said that he's not going to give weapons to chicken farmers. Syria fell, except for a few areas, again under the Alawi Shia murderers, and the Ja'faris from Iran came and did what the Jews did in Palestine. They kicked the Muslims of Syria out of their farms, lands, from their homes, and they're going to reside there. Between 500,000 Muslims and 1 million Muslims were killed in Syria. 8 million were forced to either take shelter in other areas in Syria or in the surrounding countries. Do you see a fraction of the support that came to Ukraine coming to Syria? No, you can't compare. There is no way that you can tell me that they supported the Syrian people who are invaded. Syria has been occupied by the Alawi Shiite Kuffar murderers, and now by the Ja'fari from Iran Kuffar murderers. The killing and destruction that happened in Syria is unimaginable. They refused to help, and the Russians came. Okay, you don't want to do military actions here, I'll do it. And what the Russians did in Syria is unbelievable. Death, destruction, carpet bombing of many areas like Halab. They destroyed entire sections of those cities using all kinds of weapons. And they have a base now, a permanent base, according to them, in Syria. The killing and destruction that happened there is unimaginable. Why didn't the West come to the aid of Syria when they're the ones who kept instigating the Syrians to revolt against the Alawis, their leaders? And then when they did that, they say, "Ma salama, you do, help yourself." Ukraine didn't say, "Ma salama, help yourself. Here is money, weapons, all kinds of support," and they are giving a bloody nose, as they say, to the Russians. Russians, as usual, miscalculated, like what they did in Afghanistan, because there was no way the Western countries will sit aside and allow the Russians to come and kill and destroy, occupy the entire country of Ukraine, because these people in the West, they're afraid for their, own safety, because who can prevent the Russians from going into those countries, especially if a Trump became president again, and he will dismantle this, this alliance, NATO. He will dismantle it. So the money, the weapons, the support they give to Ukraine is unbelievable, really. Not even a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of that went to Syria. They just abandoned Syria to its fate, and the Russians did so much damage and destruction in Syria, but the world wasn't there to watch with those video cameras and those reporters, going there and doing, we're close to the Russian border like they did in Ukraine. The whole world has seen it because these people came and did, their media thing and their reporting from Ukraine, and I'm from this town and from this town. Syria didn't see a fraction of that. So I can imagine, and you should imagine with me, if Russia would do this kind of damage, shelling, destruction, killing, expelling, kidnapping of children in Ukraine, in the middle of Europe, then what happened to the people of Syria? I can't imagine, because there nobody was talking about them except some media, the savagery of the Russians. Really, savagery? But how come you give the Christian Ukrainians, you give them all these weapons and support and money, unbelievable, and you abandon Syria? You see, the key word here is Muslims. Muslims. There is no other reason for the abandoning of the Syrian population except that they are Muslims. And they did not want the Muslims in Syria to take over the government from the Alawis, who since 1973 have been protecting their cousins, the Jews, Israel, from attacks. Even though the Jews, like in the past few years, have conducted hundreds and hundreds of raids on Syria, the Iranian Jafari camps and all but the Syrians always said, I heard this joke since I was growing up, we reserve the right to respond in the proper time. When is the proper time? When? So here is Syria, Gaza. Gaza. The Western world has decided to, while acknowledging that these are occupied territories, Gaza and the West Bank, to continue their abandoning of those Palestinians who live in those areas, millions of them, close to 2 million in Gaza alone, 5 miles wide, 25 miles long. That's all. That's all. All this area has been attacked like this, so savagely by the Jews. That's it. It's unbelievable how you say these are the occupiers, and the occupation powers are required by international law to protect the people under their occupation, but the Jews have been killing, destroying, stealing lands, humiliating the Palestinians every day for tens of years. And then all the West are, oh, that's Hamas, like the Jews said, Hamas doing this, Hamas doing that. Really? 250 Palestinians were killed only in this year, only in the West Bank, including many of them in my hometown, Jenin. Did they send their armies and weapons and promises of support and help, and did they condemn the Jews for doing that? After all, Israel has rejected every single resolution by the United Nations that has to do with their treatment of the Palestinians, including the United Nations resolution that the Jews, Security Council, of course, that the Jews give back the land they took in 1967. They didn't give anything, but they continued the daily humiliation and killing of Palestinians in Gaza, in the West Bank, since 1967. Do you want to take time and count how many years, how many times, how many wars, how many incursions they call them to Gaza and Jenin and other areas in the Quds, how they stole so many lands but separated and gave them to the settlers, those hard-hearted settlers. So many of them coming from Brooklyn. I doubt many of them are even Israelites. They can prove it. Gene test. They have no heart. They have no sympathy. They have no humanity. And the way they treated the Palestinians on their own land, they killed, they destroyed, they stole. And now we have 500,000 settlers in the West Bank. So the talk from the West that, the two-state solution is the best solution. How? You have hundreds of settlements. Look up the map of the West Bank. See how small it is, the whole thing. Hundreds of settlements with hundreds of thousands of settlers armed to the teeth, as they say. Armed to the teeth. And willing to kill and shoot, and they do that all the time. Like I said before, Al-Khalil, that they call Hebron, had 300, still has 300 or so settlers among a large number of Palestinians in that town. They can go anywhere and shoot and kill, with the army supporting them. And, you would go out of your house during the day to try to do some work under the blockade of the Jews. You come back, you find some Jews sitting there and saying, this is my land. God gave it to me. Abraham, here's the title, Abraham signed it. This is my house. And then you come and talk about just the last few days. Western people are I don't understand. I don't understand the mentality. You just remember the last 3 days and 4 days. What about since 1967? I'm not gonna talk even about from 1948 to 1967. Much of the lands that the Jews have in the area that they took after 1948, people who were living there, Palestinians, were expelled, killed. Towns in their entirety were erased from the face of the earth, where they killed every man, woman, child, and suckling in those towns. Menachem Begin was on the terrorist list. The British occupation forces in Palestine, promoted that, wanted terrorist Menachem Begin and the leaders of the Israelis who started that state. So they come and talk about the last 4 days, what the Hamas did. What happened? You've been sleeping since 1967? This year? How come you didn't do the same condemnation of the settlers who killed so many Palestinians? Only this year. 200 Palestinians by the army. Settlements, I've seen them. You have the Palestinian areas in such misery. There's no hope for them to have any kind of peace in their life away from these murderers and thieves. And they're having these nice compounds. The streets go from settlements around Palestinian areas so that the Palestinians can't have access to those nice roads. And the whole world, including the West side, the West Bank, is an occupied land. Okay, what are the Palestinians supposed to do? You give them no hope. Those endless peace talks end up usually in failure. Now many Arabs are lining up to submit to the Jews. And then you want to, but you can push people so much, and they have been pushed for a very long time. I doubt there is a single family in the West Bank or Gaza that can tell you, my family, none of them was killed by the Jews. I doubt there is even one family. So stop the hypocrisy. And instead of condemning Israel for what they've been doing in the past few days, all this indiscriminate destruction of Gaza, carpet bombing, unbelievable, all of this. They didn't say anything about that. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians took refuge in UN facilities. They blockaded Gaza, no water, and the West Bank, but especially Gaza, no water, no food, no medicine, they can't go out, no electricity. And this terrorist, Netanyahu, says, Gaza people, what we're gonna do is gonna change the face of the Middle East. Get out. Where are they gonna go out to? Where are they gonna go out to? I mean, look at the map. You now, while you're sitting listening to me, put the map on a part of the screen. Where are the people going to go? They're shelling everywhere. They're killing everybody. They're destroying. And that has continued since 1967 against Gaza and the West Bank. But the West only remembers what happens to the Jews. They don't remember. They don't care. They have no faith. Their faith is in money and weapons. To remember what the Jews did systematically over the decades, they don't care. They don't care. And then, what's the future for Gaza? What's going to happen? Peace talks lead to nothing. Blockaded since 2007, completely. from all directions. Small area. Where are they going to go? They can't go forward. There is no hope for anything in the future that is better than what they have been facing. Let me say this. The Palestinians have not been alive in Gaza or the West Bank. They are alive. They walk, talk, eat. They still pray, will always pray to the Creator of everything. They're kind, nice, they're generous. But the life they're living is unbelievably miserable. And the fact that the world comes to the support of the occupiers, giving them even more weapons, what does this say about those Western countries? It's all temporary. You see, everyone in existence will one day die. And then, as the Christians say to each other falsely, you're going to meet Jesus. Really? You're going to meet Jesus? You think he's going to be happy with what you're doing? You see, some Christians today here who act like they are conservative Christians, they say that the legacy of Jesus in the New Testament is woke. W-O-K-E. Nobody knows what that means, but he was woke. So don't talk about what happened in the past 4 years if you have any faith in anything. Just talk about what led to this for over tens and tens of years since 1967 for Gaza and the West Bank, and what happened in the area that the Jews took before that was unimaginable. Read the history and see what happened to these people who the Jews said, we wanted these towns. They killed everybody or expelled everybody. And many Palestinians were afraid for their life and they left. So what hope does Gaza have, the people there? What do they have in terms of hope? What's going to happen? You're going to kill them all? In many ways, they are already dead. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to support our brothers and sisters in Palestine against one of the most vicious, hard-hearted enemies that anyone can face.